We'll clear.
Good morning. It is Tuesday, 11 a.m. This is Abrasive and Proud of It Live. I'm Mike Z.
I'm Chris, and welcome to the 11 o'clock hour Eastern Standard Time, where in North Carolina it's about 40 degrees.
And how much is it in that room you're in?
Probably about 59 to 60.
Oh, the flannel makes it look all that better. So today we're talking about
You see breath coming out. It's not quite that cold yet. So
special effects. Don't give it away.
Yeah.
But today we're talking about the best abrasive deal in belts that has been around for 30 years or so, actually over 30 years, and that is the bargain box of belts. Originally introduced in 1990 through the Sanding Catalog, which was the first name of Klingspor's woodworking shop catalog. The bargain box of belts were simply offcuts that were recycled during the manufacturing process using the same industrial grade German abrasives, but at a fraction of the price.
Yeah, Mike, and these belts, they're just not those cheap throwaways that you'd see, in some of your big box stores. These are really good quality belts.
Absolutely. And so the bargain box, basically they run for $7.95 normally, and they go from 36 grit to 320. So for 3 inches wide, you're going to get, for $8, you get 6 belts. And then if they're 4 inches wide, so if it's 4x21, 4x24, that part doesn't matter. As long as it's 4 inches wide, then you get 5 belts for $7.95. But what we're doing this month through all of January is that we're celebrating the best deal in sanding belts by offering all individual packs. So that's, if you want an 80 grit in a 3x21, that's, 6 belts, you'll get that at the bargain box price, which is usually $34.95 for 36 belts. So you're getting a heck of a savings. But what we're doing differently this month is we're actually allowing you to pick out the grits that you want. So if you want 6 80 grits and you want, that times 6 packs, then you can get that at the bargain box price. You don't have to have the bargain box assortment of grits.
Yeah, so instead of being stuck with those specific grits, you can mix and match just as you see fit based on your needs. So if you use nothing but 80, go for it.
Absolutely. And so the other thing we want to recommend is that you stock up on what you'll need for the year. Don't overbuy, because we do have that question come up as far as how long do the belts last. What we recommend is that you just buy what you're going to need for basically about the year. We usually do this about twice a year. So if you were to get enough for, say, a year's worth and then stock up again towards the later part of the year, then it wouldn't be so bad. You'd have fresh belts all the time, all year long.
Yeah, and the belt itself doesn't fail. What does have a shelf life, however, is this little tape joint on the back. So, and that time frame can vary depending on how you store it, how you use it, humidity, things like that. So that will degrade and decrease the life expectancy of the joint, because it is a proprietary method in how these belts are joined. And due to that proprietary and sort of industry standard method, there are requirements that must be met, and that does have a shelf life because of the adhesive that's used to bond that.
And so in talking about that, if you go back on our YouTube channel or on our Facebook page, you'll find that there is a factory tour from Klingspor Abrasives in which they actually detail the process that goes in about making the joint itself. So it's not something you can do simply at home. It requires heat, it requires a press, But what we can recommend to you for longevity of belts is moisture is really the biggest enemy to that particular glue. So if you can keep them in a climate controlled room, if you can keep them out of the basement, if you can keep them in a plastic bag on top of the bedroom closet, anything you can do to keep moisture away from that joint, they'll last for years.
Yeah, what a lot of folks like to do is they'll buy airtight containers, and I'm not going to mention any specific names, but airtight containers, those little plastic containers with lids, they work really well, and you can buy one the size enough to store several rows of belts, and you'll be in good shape. So if you can get one of those to store all your belts, you can have them all in one place, easily access in and out, get what you need, and get right back to work. But it'll prolong the life and definitely keep them jointed together for a longer period of time.
Yeah, and so what the difference between a bargain belt versus our regular premium belts is that within the bargain belt, it's always going to be made off of offcuts, so they're not always going to be the exact material every time. They will be aluminum oxide. They will be made for the belt sander. But compared to our premium belts, which are always going to be our CS311 material, unless it's in a much higher grit like 600, for the most part, CS311 material is an open coat rock star of the belt sanding world. Either it's wide belt or portable belts, the smaller belts like this. But in the bargain box, sometimes you're not always going to get that material. Like you can see Chris there has what, the 412?
Yeah, and it could be any number of materials. We use up to about 6 different materials. So we've got, just 2 or 3 different materials listed just right here in these particular grits. So the material may change, but it could be up to 6 different ones. But all of them are going to be heavy backed. All of them are going to be aluminum oxide, and all of them are still going to be those quality industrial materials and grains that you'd see in other applications. It's just you may not get the same material twice.
Yeah. So even in the same batch, sometimes the materials can change of what's in there, but it's always going to be aluminum oxide, great for woodworking, some metalworking. It's not going to be your hard grinder. We do have materials for that called aluminum zirconia or our ceramic series, which is much better for metal grinding. But this is all mostly directed towards woodworkers in the shop or in the garage, whichever works best for you.
Yep. But we're specifically in this email blast that we've got out this week. We're talking about the bargain box. And so if you've got a portable belt or more, two or three portable belts, now is definitely the time to stock up and get those belts you need for your sander. And whether it's the 3x21, 24, or 4x24, we got it all covered for you.
Then the other thing we can also talk about is the belt cleaning stick. Now, within the belt cleaning stick, well, I guess that didn't work out so well, but the belt cleaning stick is a pure rubber stick that is going to be great for maximizing removal of any loading that happens on the belt. So if you're sanding away on something that loads up rather quickly, having this on hand will save the belt from having to actually be thrown away. You can reuse the belt over and over with several passes on this.
Yeah, and the nice thing about this is it's not just for portable belts. If you've got an edge sander, or if you've got a larger disc sander, or even a wide belt, or wide belt's a little trickier, or a drum sander, this works equally well on all abrasives. I've even got one that I'll take my orbital sander from time to time and just quickly jitter it across the surface of the block, and it cleans out my discs. So these can even be used on discs. So any abrasive that's loaded, this is the way to go. And if you own a drum sander, you have to have one of these. It's a must-have for any shop operating a drum sander for sure.
Absolutely. And they're 15% off until the end of the month. So if you don't have a belt cleaning stick, now's a great time to take a look at getting one and save yourself some money on abrasives from loading up and cleaning them out quickly.
I will throw in a quick tech tip on this. If these are used and you've had one for a year or 2 or maybe even 3, what you'll notice is the flexibility and pliability of it may not be as flexible anymore. That's okay. The chemical compound that makes this whole block up, it just dries out, but the block is still good. Actually, the harder it gets, the better it seems to work. So just don't get frustrated and throw it out if your block has gotten really hard and firm. Keep using it. You'll find that the rubber part that's inside of there still performs the action you bought it for, which is to clean out loaded abrasives.
Yeah, we've actually been in shops before, Chris and I, where people will buy these and, buy like 4 or 5 of them, and then they take the remaining ones they're not using, stick them in a window where the sun's going to hit them to dry them out faster. So they figured out the trick to that. That is an industry tech tip that if you want a longer lasting belt cleaning stick is to let it dry out more. What else do we have on sale? That Makita sander you got sitting there is $5 off. That's a
We've got quite a few different Makita options in the belt sander. This just happens to be the 3x24 model here. And, if you're in the market for a belt sander, these things are quite heavy, durable, and it's got the name Makita, so it's going to be good.
absolutely. And then we also have Mora knives, which you've got sitting there to the left.
Yeah, we have more Mora knives in stock now. These are only a couple from the selection. This happens to be the Sloyd knife. I think how they came up with that name was a guy named Sam and a guy named Floyd were sitting together and they created this, and they just combined their names to come up with it. I don't know that for sure, but that's what I imagine happened.
That's a good imagination. I'm sure it's a Swedish name of some sort, but we'll go with that.
Probably. But one of the cool things that if you're doing any kind of construction work or a woodworker in general, and you like to have neat little tools in your toolbox, this is one of those that you will want to have. Now, I will show you, if you look at it from the end, you'll see that it's got a traditional chisel end. However, if you look at it from that end, I don't know if that's showing up too well, it's actually got a chisel end along one edge as well. So you've got this end that's a chisel, that end that's a chisel, and this end that's flat. So in thoughts, you can actually use and drive this if you're trying to chisel or split larger pieces, or you can use it as a traditional woodworking chisel for doing any kind of paring or just general chisel work. It's got a really cool rubberized handle up here. So even in the summer months or when your hands are cold and dry, that you're going to get good and maintain good grip on this if you're trying to use this like a knife or if you're trying to use it like a chisel. So either way, this little more carpenter's chisel is quite cool, and I think will probably find its way in a lot of people's toolbox. And it comes with this fancy little holster, just like the Sloyd knife does, which allows you to clip that right to your belt and have it on your hip. So if you're on a job site or in your shop, you don't necessarily have to worry about keeping it protected just on the end. You've got a whole sheath to put this thing in. So nice little hard, durable holster to go along with your Mora knife or your Sloyd knife, either one.
Would you say it's recommended that you probably hit that with a rubber mallet?
Probably.
Okay.
Especially if you're driving from the top. But this is a pretty firm area up here. So I don't think there'd be any issues, but I wouldn't do any massive like log cabin chiseling. But if you're just looking to do some light chisel work, that should be fine. And this, I would probably still recommend hitting this with a soft hammer, or a mallet, but you could potentially use that with a regular hammer as well. It's all part of the hardened steel that's made up of the knife itself.
Remember, send all warranty claims to Chris at woodworkingshop.com.
Not responsible for any misuse of the tool.
All right. And then the other thing we wanted to talk about today is going to be the 5% off all water or select Waterlox finishes, which is really kind of the majority of the Waterlox finishes.
Yeah. And if you've never used Waterlox, you're kind of missing out. Is it the best finish for every application? Maybe not, but it's a really good durable finish for a lot of applications. And because they're so versatile in their lineup, they have a complete marine series. So if you're looking to do any kind of work where you're going to need outdoor weather protection, UV protection, check out their marine series. They've got a sealer, then they have a satin and a gloss. And then, of course, in their standard series, they've also got a sealer, a gloss, and then a satin as well. And then they've just recently launched a new low VOC option that's really good. So if you're looking for more of that low VOC, less aroma, less smell in the air, the low VOCs might be a little better option for you. What's nice about the brand though is how easy it is to maintain something and touch up something. So unlike some finishes that leave a really hard durable finish, this allows you to do maintenance just by simply reapplying, and because of the nature of the product, it's easy to maintain and to repair.
And so we've got a tips and tricks to a beautiful finish using Waterlox if you're unfamiliar with it, or if you're intimidated because it is an oil finish, especially a tongue oil finish. We've compiled, it says by me, but it's us, basically a tips and tricks on understanding Waterlox. So real quickly, Waterlox means to lock out water. It was designed back in 1910. The Waterlox chemists experimented with different formulations until they figured out what was the best of both worlds. And basically, they were trying to do the hand burnishing raw or modified linseed oil based products onto wood surfaces. That's what was achieved at the time. So it's a unique blend of 85% pure tung oil and 15% solvents and dryers. So if you know anything about tung oil, it takes a long time to dry. That's usually the number one complaint with a lot of people who are trying to finish with it. And so what Waterlox did was that they added some solvents and dryers to it to help that go along. Now, this finish has been made by the Hawkins family since 1910 and is still made by hand according to the original family formula. So you're not getting a, modified version of this necessarily. Now, they do have modified versions that they made, but we're talking about the original Waterlox series, both the marine and the original finish. So what is Waterlox? It's tung oil pressed from the tongue tree, and it is not petroleum based. So that's the number one misconception, because it's tung oil. People think it comes from oil or petroleum based, and it is not. And although some may notice that tung oil has an odor, it is not toxic. So if you aren't sure whether or not you're going to like the odor, or if it's something that's going to be too powerful for you, take any denomination of US currency and smell it, because that smell that is on there, the printing that's on there, is actually made with tung oil. And so if you can stand the smell of money, you can stand the smell of Waterlox.
And if you can't stand the smell of money, send it to me. I'll be happy to stand the smell for you.
P.O. Box Chris at woodworkingshop.com. And there's where to use Waterlox. There's many right ways and a few wrong ways, but basically anything and everything that's wood will work really well. Anything that's bare wood works really well for it. And so this is a reason why Waterlox original tung oil finishes are the choice for so many. But if you have an existing finish on the piece that is not water based or is not oil based, that's the only time really that it's not going to be doing really well. But the benefits of it is that it penetrates. So if you were to call in and ask us for a durable utilitarian finish, like maybe a countertop or a bar top, something that you want to be able to be used and not have to worry so much, Waterlox is going to be probably our number one recommendation, other than Armor Seal, because it penetrates into the wood. So it protects from the inside out. It also dries from the inside out. It's non-toxic and food safe when fully cured, and we'll talk about fully cured in just a second. It's easy to apply and easy to use, and it's easier to maintain than any other finish. So Danish oil is a linseed oil base for the most part, but you'll notice that if you apply some on, it takes about 6 months. You have to reapply it. So the benefit of tung oil to that is that you can go 3-4 years sometimes before you need to apply another coat, and even then, it's a very thin coat. You don't need a whole lot. But we suggest beginning all projects with Waterlox original sealer and finish. You can do both of these as far as it's a sealer, or you can make it as a finish as well. So it kind of does really well for both. It's recommended 3 to 4 coats. I like 3 coats on hardwood and then 4 coats on softer woods. But don't try to apply more than 4 coats. If you're noticing you're having some build issues, you may need to reassess your sanding operation. So always test on always do a test finish on a test piece. But for the most part, you want to keep it at about 4 coats. And so, apologize for the picture here, but the Waterlox gloss scale is simply a satin finish is like 25%. So today's standard, that would be a matte finish. Semi-gloss is a 55, so today's standard, that would be a satin. And then the high gloss is 85%, which can be buffed to 100% gloss, which is the wet look, shiny. So the original sealer finish produces a medium sheen, which is semi-gloss. And the interesting thing about how you apply Waterlox is the finish that it looks like when you're done. You've applied your 3 coats, you get it at 24 hours in between. In 3 to 6 months, it'll be its final sheen. So that's one thing a lot of people will call in and say, hey, it's still too shiny for me. I'm not very happy with how it looks. Unfortunately, you have to give it time for it to fully cure out. And that can take up to 3 to 6 months before it's going to be at its desired level. But it can be burnished up or down, which is actually really cool about it. So you can use pumice stone, you can use rotten stone. Rotten stone's going to burnish it up, so shine it. And then pumice is going to burnish it down, so it's going to dull it. So you have a little bit of workability if you want to make something very unique for your business or your projects, that you can utilize this in both ways. And then the original satin finish is going to be the dullest, if you will, the more matte or flat finish that's recommended or offered by them. It's the lowest gloss level offered. So you can use this as a finish coat only or over base coats of the original sealer. And Chris will also mention, if you take a look at your cans, Chris, mention the cans real quick as far as round and square.
Okay, it's easily identified if you are looking at a can that's more square or rectangular like these. These don't require any stirring. So literally you can pop the cap and apply just right out of the can. And naturally, these oils are going to have more of a glossy finish. But to achieve more of a satin look, they actually have to put in another property to dull that finish down. And anytime they do, that property will suspend itself when not mixed in well. So these round cans, anytime you see a round can from the Waterlox line, you'll need to actually stir those pretty well prior to use. What that does is it gets that suspended property blended back in with the product so that you can achieve the actual satin look. And so that's one of the things I learned a long time ago is if you don't get that stirred well and keep it stirred, you could achieve a different sheen level across a longer or wider piece. So just make sure that stays stirred up. And I've found that a brush works best to apply that. A rag sometimes can wipe away some of the properties, but a brush applies very well and leaves you a very nice opportunity for that to level out and give you the right finish you're looking for.
There you go. And we'll cover that too as far as application measures go. But that's why it says formulated to be brushed on and used out of the can. So the rectangular cans can be poured directly into another container and used, because you obviously can't dip a brush in that small of an orifice. But yeah, it's always recommended if you're finishing, by the way, to pour out from the can into another separate container. That way, if you pick up any dust or contaminants, that they're actually going to be on in that separate container, and you leave everything clean and proper in the original container it came in. And try not to pour back. So Waterlox original high gloss is going to be a shiny appearance of 85%. It is the highest gloss level offered in a tongue oil. It is to be used out of the can, and it can be used as a finish coat only, or it can be used under the sealer. So coverage rate is a very interesting thing because this always comes up a lot. 1 gallon covers 500 square feet per coat. So it's very important. So if you have a project that may require 3 coats, then you're going to have to take that 500 and divide it. So if you have something, say, this real easy math, so 2 coats is what you're going to need to put, then you can only get 250 square feet out of a gallon can. Same thing for a quart, 125 square feet per coat. So whatever you're going to do, however many coats you want to apply, divide that by these 2 numbers, and that'll give you an actual representation of how much you're going to need. The other thing is going to base on that too is your application, as far as brush or rag. But no thinning is necessary. It's actually pretty thin to start with. It's not a thick, goopy type of finish, which older tongue oil finishes had that property to them. But this one has never been that way. And the number of coats depends on the porosity and the density of the wood being finished. So application is apply all coats liberally with the grain. That is a big key to this. If you need to go against the grain to start, that's fine, but always come back with the grain with a natural bristle brush. If you intend on applicating with a rag versus the brush, this will most likely result in about a half to a quarter of the recommended film build for each coat. So that means that it's actually going to absorb the finish into the rag. So you're losing that square footage now because you're using a rag. So the preferred method is going to have to be brush if you want to have the most yield. They do not require shaking or stirring if they're the original Marine sealer or the Waterlox Marine, because they're in the square cans. But it is not, do not wipe on and wipe off the finish. I know that there's a lot of directions on other tongue oils that would recommend you to wipe on and then wipe off the excess. Don't do that because you're removing all of the soaking and penetrating properties from the Waterlox. So we recommend not doing that. And batching. If you plan on having a project that's going to take 500 square feet at 3 coats and you're going to need to get 2 gallons, you really want to mix those 2 gallons together to make sure that they're both evenly together. Because they're hand-poured formulations, no 2 gallons are going to ever be the same in different batches. So just simply batch them together before starting the first coat for a unified coat across the board. Sanding for adhesion purposes is not required between coats of Waterlox, so you do not have to sand. I highly recommend sanding only for the fact that you get rid of any kind of burrs, nibs any kind of debris that might have fallen onto it, because remember, this is 24 hours between coats, so dust can fall from the air. If you want the smoothest finish to feel, it's highly recommended 220, 320 in between coats, at least the first and the second coat. But the whole finish is going to be a self-leveling. And so most surface finishes, such as urethanes, require a sanding process, which is called a profile. The profile is similar to a mountain range microscopically. Failure to sand or abrade between coats of the finish can result in delamination from the new coat to the old. So this is not necessarily the case for a true tung oil finish. You do not have to sand to give it better adhesion. Chris, you want to read some?
I can't, not from where I'm at.
Sorry. With Waterlox original tung oil finishes, new coats will actually bond with the previous Waterlox coat and becomes part of it rather than a layer on top of it. So even on finely sanded wood surfaces, there are peaks and valleys, as well as spots that are hard and soft grain. When you apply the first coat of Waterlox, it's like a snowfall on the mountains. The snow caps and the peaks begin to fill the valleys. So if you sand, you will unseal the caps, and there will be less to flow to the valleys when you apply the next coat. Remember, this is a self-leveling property to the tung oil. This will result in the cap being resealed again, and therefore will result in a less desirable or available finish to flow, which is also a less desirable. It looks blotchy at that point. So oversanding can cause an issue. If you do not sand, then the next coat will flow away from the sealed caps and flow more into the valleys. And then the third and fourth coat, this will completely level out altogether to give you a nice, smooth finish. If you're doing vertical surfaces, this is a little bit tougher, but it still does work. So some customers will lightly sand with 320 grit sandpaper or a fine non-woven. We don't recommend steel wool. That is a completely different subject, but for the most part, if you can, stay with the non-woven. It's a more consistent scratch. Or 320 grit sandpaper, more recommended for open grain wood. So if you're doing in-grain cutting boards, this is a wonderful finish that will last a long time. Soak in really well too. And then if you do a light sand as performed, please clean the surface with a lint-free cloth or a little bit of mineral spirits, also paint thinner. If your surface may look uneven in appearance after the first or even the second coat of Waterlox finish, this is completely normal. Waterlox penetrates deep into the wood and will build up on an even film when applied the suggested number of coats and coverage. So brush applications are: dip the brush bristles about a third of the way into the finish, remove any excess, and gently tap the brush against the side of the can. Do not slap or drag the brush. Also, begin with long, even strokes against the grain. Let only the tip of the brush touch the surface, overlapping each brush stroke slightly. And one of the biggest things I see that's an issue with people that are brushing for the first time is too much pressure on the brush causes channeling. This is where your bristles kind of come together and flow out in a big channel of fluid where they have next to each other all along. It's uneven, so you have a little finish here and a lot of finish there, and it's across the board, and it gives you that brush stroke look. That's actually too much pressure on the brush. So back off the pressure on the brush, you'll get a lot better look to it. But remove the air bubbles, brush along the grain with more finish until they disappear, and that's just a light coat. Dry time. This is the important part of Waterlox, what everyone came to the survey for. The general rule of thumb is to wait 24 hours in between coats. Poor ventilation, high humidities, and cool temperatures will increase dry times. Allow each coat to dry 24 hours. At least one coat of finish is applied. Allow it to flash cure for 72 to 96 hours. Ooh, there we go. And this means that not to touch, remove the project, or the film is still tacky and will leave impressions. Although the recommended dry time is 24 hours, it will take completely cure 30 to 90 days. So that's the hardest, most durable type of it. And then the 3 to 6 months is for the sheen to completely come down and be where it's going to stay. If at all possible, the first 7 days, keep it at room ambient temperature above 70 degrees if possible, and cross ventilation. So just having a fan on in the room and it's blowing the same air isn't going to help it dry faster. What you really need is fresh oxygen circulated 7 times an hour. So if you can have an open window just slightly and then a closed window something along those lines, then it'll help dry tongue oil faster because oxygen is its catalyst. And that's the big secret about tongue oil is that if you want it to dry quicker and cure faster, oxygen is going to be your key, but it has to be fresh oxygen. Can't be the same oxygen in the room, and it's not recommended to have the heat and air conditioning ducts directly above it because then that's going to be blowing inaccurate air across certain parts of the surface, causing it to flash faster. So it's just highly recommended not to do it that direction. So I hope that was somewhat helpful when it comes to Waterlox finishes because I know that they can be a pain and they can be intimidating, but it's really a simple finish to apply.
Yeah, the dry time definitely is huge from experience. 20 hours is you got to let it do the least the full 24 under ideal conditions. There are some times where a little longer is even better.
Yep. And it all depends on temperature. If you can keep it above 70, that's good. You need to have it at least above 50. And we're talking about the temperature of the workpiece, not the air around it. So if it's 20 degrees tonight and you come in the shop and turn on the heat and now it's 72, check the work surface. Make sure it's at least 50 degrees or above before applying. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of gummy issues, if you will.
And high humidity will cause a similar issue if you're not careful. So
especially if you trap the
finish,
humidity.
though. I love it. You just got to know kind of the right times to use it for sure.
Yep. So really, summertime is a great time to use it. Spring and fall. The wintertime, depending on where you live, may not be ideal. But for the most part, it's a very easy finish. If you have time to apply the finish, if you have time to apply and walk away, it's a great finish and it'll last you years of service, especially countertops, cutting boards. Easily one of the best finishes to apply on those for long-term maintenance. Well, sir, I think that does it for today. I rambled too much. I apologize. Finishing. It's what it is.
Well, hey, Waterlox is a great product. Sometimes it's easier to have a little extra information than not enough.
That's right. And today's episode was not brought to you by Waterlox whatsoever. It's just a product we have on sale that we both enjoy using. So we want to let you know that if you hadn't tried it yet, by all means, check out woodworkingshop.com. There is a small little blue circle at the bottom for messages. Send us a message. Say, hey, if I saw that Waterlox thing, I want to ask you a couple questions about it. Chris and I are both more than happy to help you because we really believe in that product as far as really ease of use, simple use.
Yep. And here at Klingspor's Woodworking Shop, we're not just people selling you and talking to you about stuff. We're actual users of the product. So we can give you firsthand knowledge and experience of what to expect.
That's right. That's what makes us different. And visit our 4 stores in North Carolina. Everyone that works there is some sort of woodworker in some way, whether it's part-time or they've owned a full-time business at one time and retired. They're all going to have experiences of their own and products that they used as well. So by all means, stop into the store and get that expert advice you've been looking for in a woodworking store.
Yep. Visit the store, visit online, or give us a call, and we'll take care of you either way you go. But I guess that's probably about it for today, Mike.
That's it. Dial in 22. That's right for you, Chris. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching Abrasive and Proud of It Live. I'm Mike Z.
I'm Chris, and we'll see you next time.
Have a good one, guys.